Welcome everybody to the third day of our summit. Good morning, good evening, depending where you are. While the conference is going on, we cannot ignore the events that are happening outside throughout the United States. As a minority group, Jews always have felt that whenever any other minority group gets attacked, as if they got personally attacked. This is true whether Jews are the one who live in the United States, in Israel, in Europe, South Africa, or South America. The man who replaces me at the office by the name Bill Lindborg, I'm socially distancing here, didn't sleep a wink last night as marooning groups were roaming the streets. The alarm companies kept waking him up. In the morning, on his way to the office, he saw a scene that he described to me. He was going through downtown and he saw hundreds of people quietly cleaning shards of glass, helping store owners and restaurateurs put their lives back together. I realized when he told me the story that I've seen that scene before. As a child growing up in Israel, after time of war and strife, Israelis always came together as one. And very soon after, life came back to normal. At that moment, I realized that we're going to be fine. The United States is going to be fine. We're all going to be okay. Because with this kind of unity, we're going to have a very bright future ahead of us. And we're going to put all this behind us as we move forward. Thank you.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today at the New Tomorrow Summit by IAC and the Erez Center for Peace and Innovation. I'm Noah Kolp, the head of the Technology and Startup Banking Group at IDB Bank, Discount New York. COVID-19 is affecting the world in many ways and is causing an enormous economic uncertainty and volatility. At our session today, Innovating Our Way Out from Obstacles to Opportunities, we will focus as much as possible on the bright side of this challenging period of time, and we will try to suggest ideas on how to find opportunities in difficult environments. Four of the most experienced figures in the Israeli-American tech ecosystem will be assisting us with our mission today, not an easy mission. Soffer Teeni is a general manager of Facebook Israel. Golovinsky is a general manager of Intuit Israel. Yaniv Garty, Intel Israel general manager, and Chemi, the founder of Bitengo VC and the chairman of the board of the Erez Center of Peace and Innovation. Hello to all of you, and thank you for joining us today.
Hi. Good afternoon. Good evening.
Good afternoon.
Thanks for being here.
I would like to start at the more, I would say, personal angle. You're all accomplished, successful, and experienced leader, but I would like your personal take on this situation. How did COVID-19 affected your lives and the way you look at the world we live in? Let's start with you, Adi.
Maybe I'll start by saying that, first of all, amazing to be here, and thank you for inviting me.
That's a great start.
And I think that the first thing is that, everyone in my family and close to me are all healthy. So obviously, when talking about, personal experience during this time, I'm privileged to be in a position that I can talk about the non-health related impact. And the most important one was a lesson in humbleness. And there are probably two main things here. The first lesson in humbleness was that this period has shown us the power of nature. I don't know about you, but this is, I was sitting at home and feeling powerless, and how powerless we all are in the face of this pandemic. It doesn't matter who you are for the first time, where you're from, if you are rich or poor, if you have a master's degree or you didn't finish school. All of us all over the world experience this together. So one lesson in humbleness. And then the second one, which actually keeps me awake at night, was the realization that there are so many things we do in a certain way just because we are used to it. And that has developed a sort of a limit to the way we think, to the way we do things. We are used to living our lives in a certain way, buying groceries in a certain way, working in a certain way, meeting friends in a certain way, spending time with the family in a certain way. And all of a sudden, we couldn't do those things anymore. We had to get very creative. And I believe all of us initially thought that this is going to be a terrible experience. Our whole life, suddenly turning upside down, at least mine, and we can't go to the office anymore and see our parents and all of those things. But during this period and these past few months, I've realized for the first time how much our habits are almost like a prison. It was like
okay, Chemi, what's your take?
First of all, great words. I share what Adi said. I'll make maybe a few additional comments. First of all, I'll say that the first thing I sensed is how fragile the world is when a virus, which is invisible, really causes so much trouble, so much fear and despair around the world. Personally, I felt very lucky because our business and our activities have managed to continue, and even some parts of it in a higher rate of success. And I was at home, safe, and I felt that I'm lucky that I'm part of the technology ecosystem. I was also inspired by the global collaboration, coordination, and cooperation. There's been, of course, some little wars about protection measures like masks, like nose swabs, like ventilators. But in general, seeing the collaboration around the world, the race to find a vaccination, drugs, and diagnostics has been quite inspiring. I was also inspired by the way our companies reacted and responded immediately. They took measures to protect their people, to protect their business, and very quickly turned into looking for the opportunities.
Chemi, we're going to speak about the professional points in a little bit. Yaniv, how did COVID-19 affected your life and the way you look at the world in a non-professional way?
So I was at home. Sorry, you're talking to Yaniv. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me. And just a couple of additions. I think it might sound cynical, but on a personal level, I'm still searching for the fast forward button to get away from 2020. I think all of us have experienced some of the longest weeks of our lives during the last few months. I think we are all witnessing a historical moment or a period, because this is a crisis which is not only deep but also very wide. And I think one of the lessons I can add to what Adi and Chemi mentioned is the being able to get to a sense of clarity, clarity of purpose, the clarity of action, and how we use that both on our personal lives and our professional lives.
Jean, you were in the US at the point where, due to the corona, you weren't able to fly to Israel. And you ran the company from where you were, the US. And at first hand, you can tell us, does it really matter where you are?
Well, I'm still in California, right? I'm on the West Coast time zone. And when I moved to Israel to run into the Israel Development Center in Tel Aviv in 2019, the plan was all along that I will make often trips between Tel Aviv and San Francisco, Mountain View headquarters. When I came here to California in March, little that I know that I'll probably stuck here for 4 to 5 months now. So I think global pandemic blurred geographical boundaries, although we decided to keep the time zones. And the situation when everybody is working from home, it doesn't really matter that much where the home is, as long as you stay connected to the company, to your employees. But it is an interesting point, though, with everybody in the tech industry, or almost everybody in the tech industry, working from home and trying to work from home. What do you do about the company culture? How do you preserve company culture? How do you hire and absorb new employees? How they, by osmosis, adopt the company culture? Company culture is not just driven by the physical space, although that's a big part of it, but it's also a common mission, and ours is power and prosperity around the world. And people are so used to, at this point, people are so used to interacting in certain ways. The proverbial water cooler conversation is no longer possible. Swinging by somebody's desk and having a quick chat is no longer possible. So we had to figure out what to do about it, how to stay present while being absent. And this is my challenge. And, to a degree, I believe in the very virtualized and even more so virtualized world. It means and matters less and less where you are physically, as long as you're connected. And that's what modern technology allows all of us to do, to stay connected. But the lives are upside down for everyone. There's no question about it.
Yaniv, Intel has more than 13 employees in Israel. How does a company with so many employees work and function remotely?
I think you meant 13,000.
13,000.
Yeah, quite a bunch. I mentioned before clarity of purpose and action. I think for us, immediately after all of this started, it boiled down to two things: ensure the safety and well-being of our employees and their families, and ensuring business continuity with an eye on our customer needs. We didn't turn off the lights at any of our sites in Israel at any time. There are certain things that we cannot do remotely. We have a big advanced manufacturing site. People need to be there. We have design and engineering labs. We have data centers. So there have been more than a few, quite a big number of employees that went to on site daily. But we still had the majority of employees working from home. It helped us with those on site to kind of space things and keep their safety. And for those working from home, in many ways, working from home is not something which is foreign to us. We have started enabling that to those who can do their job remotely about a decade ago. And we're a global company, like the other companies. We have all the tools. We have video conferencing and all of that. But it goes way beyond that. It's the how you make sure that people are feeling emotionally safe. How do they feel that there is stability? Things like making sure that we don't have any of our employees, but and also our subcontractors being laid off during the pandemic. Helping people financially with things like babysitters and things like that. All the way to taking more of a focus on the emotional side of things, how you manage remotely, how you create a team culture like Jean mentioned before. And all of that is also leading to driving the business continuity. At the end of the day, we're a business. We reported a very strong Q1. We also had an outlook for Q2. Here in Israel, we met all of our targets, which also has a very positive impact on the Israeli financial indicators, because it helps on exports indicators, GDP. Last year, we have been about 1.6% of the GDP of Israel, and also the employment rates. So all of that together, kind of the two kind of are basically tied together, weaved together. But these are the two things that we were focusing on throughout the time.
Adi, it seems like Facebook has a crucial role, more than ever, allowing people to stay connected. Are there any changes in the way you work and do things because of COVID-19?
So first of all, like similar to what Yaniv said, and probably even easier for us being a software company working from home, was something that we relatively adopted too fast. At the same time, it creates a lot of challenges on, culture and how to brainstorm and be creative together. I think that there were three top of minds. One is obviously making sure that our platforms are being used in, the right way, and connecting people was more important than ever. So a lot of focus on that, with massive increase in volume across the board: Instagram, Facebook, WhatsApp, Messenger, Live, that was used by so many, like the discussion we have right now, but artists, journalists, so supporting politicians, supporting all of them. Launching a new product was a focus on new products in general, but video rooms around connectivity was a top of mind. So thinking about the new products or moving fast in releasing features and products was very important to us. Then another pillar was to make sure that information is being shared properly. We were searching for the right information every day. I think that we were all becoming addict of data. And we built an information center, which is basically available to everyone every day on their feed, and 2 billion people used it. Focusing on how to do that and how to work with the health organization globally was important, but also to make sure that we take misinformation outside of the platform in a very consistent and fast way. And then the last one would be figuring out how Facebook can be used to help in the economic recovery, especially with small businesses, with a pledge of $100 million. And in Israel, we actually have a really cool project. We work with all the tech companies, including Wix and Fiverr and many of the startups, to try to help small businesses recover fast. So I think these were like the top of mind for us during this period. And of course, culture and work from home.
Jean, how did you in Intuit kept the positive can-do attitude and stayed innovative during this crisis?
That's a great question. Initially, when this whole work from home started and people were trying to figure out how to adapt, we actually expect a drop in productivity for engineering teams. And in Israel, we're just pure engineering team. We even had a conversation: how do we do replanning? Can we keep all of our deliverables? Not one team did the replanning and delivered on time just about all the obligations that they're committed before the pandemic started. That was just purely amazing. The company itself made sure that employees are most productive at home, and that goes from supplying large screens and ergonomic keyboards and ergonomic chairs to the employees that need that, upgrading broadband connectivity for those that needed that. And even more so, in a very few weeks, we launched 3 new offerings that are related to the recovery plan. That's Intuit Aid Assist. They're a free website, an interactive tool to help businesses, small business owners and employees, and the individual consumers to understand how much and what they're eligible from the CARES Act that Congress has adopted. QuickBook Capital is non-bank approved lender that allows paycheck protection program that you can register through and get the loan through QuickBooks, which is obviously done in minutes. And TurboTax stimulus registration, as many of you know, people that receive stimulus check from the government receive it faster if they actually have an electronic record with IRS. So even if people never filed taxes through TurboTax, they could do that now for free, just to have the record and they have their stimulus check deposited quite immediately. I mentioned before that the well-run companies, people are kind of galvanized by the common mission, and ours is power and prosperity around the world. People really felt the sense of purpose, and engineers felt the sense of purpose. It's no secret to anybody, small businesses are suffering. The unemployment all over the world is very high. I think the sense of gratitude and obligation that Intuit employees can help others stimulated quite a bit of creativity and adaptivity across the board, from US to Israel.
Chemi, how do you and Pitango do business these days? Do you look at companies and investment opportunities differently than before? Probably yes, but your take is interesting.
The second answer is yes, of course, we do business in a different way. But how do we do business? First, I think that we learned that things that we started before COVID-19 was very easy to continue. We closed the fundraising. We sold a couple of companies. One of them was announced today. We closed some rounds of funding. So it's easy to work on Zoom and emails when you are continuing a process. It's harder to start new things. And Zoom does not allow you really a good judgment of people when you want to recruit people, or to look at a young company when you don't have a sense of the founding team. It has to be physical at the end of the day. There's also, we miss the fact that in real life, you are near people, and sometimes you are in a certain area and they tell you should meet this guy, you should talk to that guy, and opportunities are created. You cannot do it on Zoom. As for the kind of companies, first question in a company is, will they survive the next COVID-19, maybe COVID-20, who knows, 21? Will they be able to be resilient and productive and cross the pandemic or the plague or the crisis, whatever it will be? We discovered that the world is divided to a physical part and a digital part, and your business model needs to be adapted to both spheres. So when one thing goes down, you can still run your business on the other one. And bear in mind, in this crisis, the physical side was shut down, the digital side was open, but tomorrow we can experience something different, where a cyber attack, we shut down all our digital aims and we'll have to work manually. So fragility of companies is becoming critical when we look at a new investment opportunity.
We're looking at an industry shift these days on hot trends that are cooling down while new stars are shining. Adi, which sector do you think will be dominant and fast growing from now on?
So at the beginning, we were trying to look at the industries, especially on the tech and startups, which are our focus in Israel. And we were trying to assess what would the future look like for them. And we built a kind of a 2x2 model. So imagine like the horizontal line represent the company's financial resilience, how much money they have in the bank, of course, but also strong business model, strong unit economics, etc. And obviously companies that enter this crisis with a stronger economical resilience will survive better regardless of the industry. But the second one, or the vertical line, represent what we call a situation market fit. So not product market fit, but situation market fit for product and services that are relevant today and in the coming, few months and few years. And then few verticals comes to mind. I'll just share, I think that B2B SaaS, and especially companies that rely on an online funnel rather than face-to-face and long-term sales processes are super interesting, and Monday.com is a great example for that in Israel. But also consumer tech startups like JoyTunes and Lightrix and many, many others that have a very strong situation market fit. Not only saw an amazing acceleration during these last 2 months, but I think that have a very strong coming few years ahead of them.
Jean, what's your take? What stars are we going to be shining the next few years?
Even before COVID and the global pandemic, the world was becoming, and rapidly so, more and more virtualized. We were using virtual presence devices, video conferencing and all of that. A few years ago, we actually made a bet on digitizing service industry. And even more now than before, it is clear that the bet is correct. Just imagine that you need to file taxes. That's what we do. We help people to file taxes. And you can actually enjoy the consult of the professional accountant through TurboTax Live. That doesn't necessarily require for you to go to a brick and mortar store and to talk to the person face to face. That person can reside anywhere on the planet. The same applies to QuickBooks Live. You can connect to the accountant and to get a professional advice how to organize your books. Digital payments experiencing quite a bit of growth. It was growing already, it's now even more so. So it's pretty apparent that with this pandemic or another pandemic maybe coming, people will prefer to do as much as possible virtually, and having ability to enable people to do so safely, effectively, and reliably is becoming not just a trend, but a necessity. It's not a fashion anymore. If you watch CNBC Mad Money, that they will tell you there are some companies that were tailored for pandemic, and there are some companies that succeed quite immensely during this time because of the ability to enable virtual collaboration and virtual communication. That is not to say that it doesn't open additional problems with the cybersecurity, as Chemi mentioned. We have to be very watchful about that. But it is an opportunity for both cybersecurity and AI to do better and to enable more reliable and more usable virtual experiences for people and businesses.
Thank you, Gene. Chemi, what's your estimation? We're going to be the shining stars, and unfortunately, we will be what trends and what sectors we're going to be seeing cooling down.
So the first two observations is that, first of all, the world got a push in the back towards technology and innovation. People use technology like they never did before, and I would assume probably a decade ahead. That happened in distance learning, in digital health, in other areas. So first, I would say everything that relates to data. Most of our companies are actually building their exit strategy with data. It's data-driven exit and monitoring of the situation. So those who will contribute to the connectivity to the digital network will probably be very strong. Another area is digital health. I think whatever we can do outside of hospitals and outside of physical touch will flourish, and we see tremendous growth in our healthcare companies. Cybersecurity for sure, because we saw what happened when Iran and Israel exchanged some cyber attacks during COVID, and you need to remember that when you have a global crisis, it should not stay only in one dimension. There will be other dimensions. It's healthcare, it's economic, it's cybersecurity, and maybe others will come in. So I think that those are the three areas that I would say would benefit from the crisis. And of course, there will be others. And I think that to add to that, I think is the new business models that will arise, companies that will be able to address, as Adi said, the situation product fit will also benefit.
Thank you, Chemi. Yaniv, your take is that not everything is Corona, and that companies should focus also on fields and solutions and services that are not Corona related. Can you explain more about this opinion of yours?
Yeah, first of all, definitely Corona and the pandemic are top of mind in terms of personal safety. But when we look at where we are today, a minute before it all started, we were still part of a journey which is a technological revolution, which was centered around data. We are a known brand, but probably people are not aware of the fact that under the hood of many of the things we do online and virtual, there are computing or AI or cyber or networking solutions that we are dealing with. We also kind of famous for Moore's Law, and Moore's Law also applies for data. We are seeing that the amount of data the humanity produces doubles every 18 months. So every 18 months we produce the same amount of data as the rest of history for humankind. But what's also interesting about that is up until lately, we have been using only about, and depends on which research you look at, 3, 4, 5, 6% of that. I think what we have seen during Corona is an uptake, an acceleration of the usage of data in different domains, different activities, distance learning, online services, ordering food, distance medicine, and I think Adi mentioned about a shop owner and how they now manage the supply chain management and customer base. So there is going to be, in our opinion, not only an increase in the amount of data, but also the ability to actually use the data and drive new services out of it.
I would like to speak now about the long-term effect of COVID-19 on innovation, technology, and Yaniv, you acquired Moveit a month ago for $1 billion. Do you expect acquisitions, deals like this, to be less common from now on, at least in the near to medium future?
I think there was a great session right after us of Erez and Neil are going to talk about, I think you dubbed it as acquisition in Flipflops or something like that. So they're going to talk more in details about the Movit acquisition. And we are very happy. You know, it's the, if I didn't lose my math, it's the 19th acquisition that Intel has made here in Israel. So it's definitely something we're proud of. We have two main kind of arms which are kind of working together with the innovation ecosystem or the startups. One is Intel Capital. The other one is a growth program that we call Ignite. We do see that Intel Capital continues to invest. They've announced about a month ago investing $132 million in about 11 companies. So that's a good pace. But we do see, and that's from dealing with early stage startups in a growth accelerator, that if up until COVID broke, for those great companies, money was probably, or funding was probably not part of the top 5 things they had on their list. It became, right now, money is listed on all 1 to 5. And definitely, it's time, those times changed. I think we'll continue to see acquisitions, we'll continue to see investments. There is a delay with some of those. I see programs coming out of, especially in Israel, from the Israel Innovation Authority. I think it's critical to help bridging funding for startups, because they are not accustomed to use the banking system for money. And we do see, when we started our second round of the accelerator and we went all virtual, we were concerned about the engagement of people. But how silly it may sound, actually the fact that people are not traveling helped quite a bit. So many investments and acquisitions are based on personal relationship, and I think people are starting to find ways to create and build those bridges. Even if you do that virtually, it takes more time, it is done differently. But once those are established, the rest can follow.
Chemi, we're seeing major decline in investment at startups the past few months. How do VCs and investors operate, and what's the likelihood of a startup to raise capital these days?
So thank you for the question. We have multiple funds which are focused on early stage and growth. On the early stage side, those companies that are now raising money and they are aiming towards what we call the new normal are extremely attractive, and we know that they're going to develop their products and launch them either in 2021 or 2022. So that is, in my mind, a no-brainer. You find a great team and you invest in that team, and you know that the milestone will bridge over the next 18 to 24 months. That's a no-brainer. With regards to the growing companies, many companies are now growing faster, and actually they enjoy the excessive demand because of the crisis. And I think these companies are now raising additional funds in order to extend the runway, another opportunity for us to participate in companies that either we missed or by the time we wanted to invest, it was a little bit too expensive, but they made a way, and we're looking at both sides. I think it's more challenging for those companies that are young, have not yet attracted enough interest from customers nor from investors. They have a short runway. They will be challenged by their ability to raise money, primarily because of the reason that, in Israel, we don't sense it, but the US is going to enter a terrible global financial crisis. And that is the thing that worries me most than anything else. So these companies will not be able to make it, unfortunately. But still, I think that the level of innovation, the ability of Israeli companies to pivot and to adapt to the new change, and this is the subject matter of this discussion, is really outstanding. The creativity, the ability to turn around on a coin is extremely interesting. And I can tell you from looking at our portfolio, we had, thank God, none of our companies really was hit in a way that is irrecoverable.
For entrepreneurs and founders that are watching us right now, what is the way to break out of the mentality of self-preservation into the mode of seeking opportunities, or if to use the cliche, how to turn lemons into lemonades? Adi, let's start with you.
Cool. Maybe just to refer to what Chemi said, and I think that early stage startups may see some challenges in the coming period, and we talked to many of them. However, it's also an opportunity, and you see those VCs that understand that it's going to be an opportunity period to find an amazing companies to invest in. So I think that there's also a lemonade even for early stage startups. And to your question about entrepreneurs in the room, so the first thing I would say is that they can teach all of us how to adapt fast. Probably these entrepreneurs knows better than anyone on this panel how to actually do that. But few things maybe to keep in mind. One is that many people mistakenly, and that's also true in big companies, thinks that in crisis mode companies needs to centralize more and centralize everything, decision, resources. I actually think that it's exactly the opposite. I think that in crisis mode you need to decentralize as much as possible and give small teams the ability to move fast and adjust. There's actually a Harvard Business Review article that is really, really strong, creating a really strong argument around that. So that's one. The second thing that is very relevant to startups is that balance between long-term and short-term bets. And it's time for shorter-term bets. So it's like move fast, move even faster. And the way I see it right now, and also in the last 2 months working with many startups, many of these quick wins or short-term opportunities can actually present a really cool long-term bet for the company. But move fast on product, on launching, on looking at the data and reacting to it, whether it's geography opportunities or audiences opportunities or product. And then the last one would be, or maybe two. One is to capitalize. It's time to capitalize on strong talent and culture. I think everyone said it before. And entrepreneurs that really are figuring out how to do that, how to bring their culture to life, and how to capitalize on the talent they've hired right now more than ever would be more successful. And the last, for me, is one that is a bit more emotional, and it's for me, it's like trying to imagine how everything would look like when this crisis will be over, and imagine ourselves at that end line, and we look back, and are we proud in the way we showed up, with our employees, in the way we showed up with our investors, in the way we showed up with our clients and customers, and not less important, in the way we showed up with our families. So the hindsight and look back perspective, I think, is one I would think of every minute of every day.
Yaniv, what's the way to do it? You have long experience as a senior manager and executive. How do you leave this mentality of self-preservation and move into the mode of seeking opportunities and being innovative and creative?
If you'll allow me to bore you with a bit of a sports analogy.
Okay.
If you look back at history, humanity did go through some major crises before, whether other plagues or wars. Humanity always excelled afterwards. I think there are huge opportunities, whether it's startups or medium-sized companies or big companies. But in order to do so, you cannot take your team off the field. You cannot just play defense. You have to have the right mix of defense and offense, but also be looking all the time whether the rules of the games are changing on you. So you have to listen, which means you have to look for opportunities and adapt to the mix of type of players you have on the field. So again, for the basic analogy, it all drives at the end. Those who can change, those who can adapt, those who can understand their assets, those who play offense while others may play defense, go to a saying which I kind of find quite important these times, of Andy Grove, which was one of our founders. He said that, at the times of crisis, weak companies are being destroyed. Good companies will survive, but great companies will improve, will excel. And I think those who will be quick on strategy, play the defense, but have always the offense team on the field. Those will excel and thrive after this.
We have to really finish in 2 minutes. Gene, what's your take? And I understand that you believe that large corporation, they have a role in helping small and medium companies, especially at these times.
Without a doubt. And I think one of the most dangerous things is to say business as usual. There is nothing usual about the business right now. And I think if you're actually trying to pretend that there is business as usual, they're doing the service to you, to your employees, and to your customers. I think Adi, you mentioned, maybe, and you have, everybody had quite a bit of wisdom to share. But how you show up to your customers, how you're reaching out to your customers, how you're helping your customers, and we're into it as in business of helping small businesses, right? Small businesses are the most impacted right now. How we helping them, how we're standing up for them is fundamentally how we succeed. Their success is our success, without a question. And we've been very thoughtful in understanding how we make the most based on our experiences, how to help to get to the financial resources that they need. There is one more thing, is that the whole pandemic kind of showed to us that we can be productive working from home. It doesn't mean that we have to abandon our offices, but it does mean that we can and should rethink how we approach our office space, how we approach competition for talent. In many ways, competition for talent is very brutal, and in many cases, we just kind of now would be able to allow for people to work remotely while becoming part of our family. So if you want, we would think about the hubs of talent, right? That's the Tel Aviv hub, that's the Bay Area hub, and so on.
Thank you, Gene, and thank you, our wonderful panelists for today. Adi Soffer, Teeni, the General Manager of Facebook Israel, Gene Golovinsky, the General Manager of Intuit Israel, Yaniv Garty, Intel Israel General Manager, and Chemi Perez, Managing General Manager of Pitango VC and the Chairman of the Board of the Center, the Paris Center for Peace of Innovation. I'm Noah Kolp, the head of the technology and startup banking group at IDB Bank, Discount New York. Thank you all for joining us today at The New Tomorrow. Good luck and all the best.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hello. Hi, everybody. Hi, Nir. Hi, Erez. How are you doing? Hello to
Hi.
all of our viewers and audience from all over the world. We're really, really excited to have you guys here. My name is Noah Oron. I'm the Director of Global Business Development at Kaltura, but also the moderator for this amazing panel that we have today. And I will introduce my guests in just 1 second. We're very excited for this panel, and we're very thankful, Erez and Nir, that you guys joined us today. And I wanted to kick off by, first of all, giving us a little bit of an explanation of what we're going to be talking about today, and then introduce, obviously, my guests and kick off. We have 30 minutes, which is not that much time, which means that we're going to speak very, very fast, and hopefully we'll have some time for some questions from the audience. So to kick off, about a month ago, Intel acquired MoveIt for approximately $900 million. This panel was called M&A and Flipflops for a good reason, because this deal took place during COVID-19 while all stakeholders were at home, proving that their business is a little bit stronger than this pandemic or the business plans. A little bit of background about each one of these companies. MoveIt is a mobility as a service solutions company. The company was founded in Tel Aviv in 2012, providing a free app that helped Israelis get around town effectively and conveniently using any mode of transit. The app combines data about all forms of transport, from buses and trains to local bicycle services, ride-hailing services, scooters, car sharing, carpooling, and more. I personally use it myself to navigate the bus system in Tel Aviv. Today, MoveIt is operating in more than 100 countries across more than 3,200 cities. Mobileye, which you guys are probably also familiar with, is an Israeli subsidiary of Intel, developing vision-based self-driving cars and advanced driver assistant systems. You can find Mobileye systems in more than 60 million cars today across 25 global manufacturers. And by the way, Intel's acquisition of Mobileye is the largest acquisition of an Israeli company to date. And that was more than $15 billion. Correct me if I'm wrong, guys. Now, the recent acquisition of MoveIt by Mobileye was done with the goal of both companies joining forces together to lead the future revolution of new mobility services. And I'm using the terminology that the teams themselves use, and I would love for you guys to also help us understand what that means. And we're about to find out more today. So I'm very, very excited to introduce our panelists. Erez Dagan, Executive Vice President of Product and Strategy at Mobileye. Hello, Erez. And Nir Erez, the founder and CEO of MoveIt. And as a short warm-up question, you guys probably didn't think that you were going to sign this deal from home. What's a fun fact that you can start off with from this recent deal?
You want to start, Erez?
That's good.
Yeah, I think the name of this panel was actually coming from something I talked about, and I was actually sitting in this particular chair in this particular room. As you can see behind me, there's only some drinks, but I spent like 42 days sitting here trying to conduct these deals, and big part of it I was actually wearing flip-flops. So that's maybe some fun part of doing the deal from home.
Erez, on your end?
Yeah, probably the biggest difference to a regular deal is that you can't go out and drink in the middle of the COVID, but
doing virtual shots.
Celebrate the deal.
Cool. So I'm going to start with some predictions from you guys, and I hope that the audience is going to write them down and remember those, and we'll see what happens in a few years. So I'd like to get one prediction from each of you. When do you think that we will see autonomous vehicles driving in the streets of New York? And what would it look and feel like?
So we're looking at probably a timescale of 3 years from now for autonomous services roaming the streets of the US and several selected metropolitans. Likely New York is one of them. There are several such service modalities or service types to consider. It could be what's called first last mile, something that brings you to the public transportation and disperses you away from it. The second type would be a simple A to B, very similar to a ride hailing that you have today in Uber and Lyft, just going to be a robotaxi. And the third one would be a dynamically routed, intelligently routed shared shuttle that allows people to get from very close to their origin to very close to their destination in a very time-effective manner and very cost effectively.
Great. Nir, any predictions on your end?
I just want to summarize what Erez said is that, we're not going to see one unified type of mobility moving forward, the other way around. I think that what we have learned in the last 10 years and collecting data from more than 800 million users that we have is that the needs are very complex and are changing, and the systems as they are today are broken. So Erez just described multiple options where we could use this amazing technology developed by Mobileye to put different, let's call it form factors of vehicles that could serve for different purposes. First last mile is one of them, and the type of ride hailing is another one. But the last thing I can say is that mass transit, like the trains and subways, are here to stay, because that's pretty much going to be the backbone and the grid that everybody's going to use around these other means of mobility.
And hopefully we're all going to be able to go on the subway again. I'm personally based in New York, so I hope that we'll be able to use the subway again, and I hope that we'll be able to use public transportation again safely and hopefully in a smarter way. And you guys are actually bringing me to my next question. So you guys are combining two different technologies, and we would love to understand a little bit better how that might work. And we're going to actually use the platform that we're using right now and take advantage of the fact that we're doing this live. So I would ask the production team, Omer and Shiri, if you can please play the slide that will help us understand what exactly is the connection between Move It and Mobile and how they're going to be working together. And Nir or Erez, would you like to explain what we're seeing?
Maybe I'll start with a sentence, and then we can go into the details together. In a very simple sentence, Move It has been working diligently to digitize transportation, urban transportation on a very large global scale. And often digitization is the first step on the way to automation. That happens in multiple fields, and transportation shouldn't be different. Mobileye brings the lower end of this stack that allows to automate what's already been digitized and made accessible through a very convenient one-stop shop.
And I might add to it something way more down to earth, which, represented here, which is a combination of companies that builds maybe the best of breed supply for mobility, which is the bottom layers of the stack, with the companies that clearly see a huge demand side from users. And if you look at the potential market side or marketplace for mobility, combining the fact that we can control both supply and demand will allow us to really change the way people are moving today.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
It's important to say, to use that point that Nir made, to also explain that when we want to introduce autonomous transportation solutions into an existing public transit fabric or transportation fabric of a city, we really need to understand the demand and supply balances in very rich description and very real-time sources of information, and that would make that technology much more optimally weaved into that context, which makes it also very affordable to the users in the end and proliferates it.
And maybe you can give some examples from your plans of bringing. You've already announced that you announced that you're going to bring the robot taxi services to Tel Aviv by 2022. And I would love to understand, what would that look like? What does it mean to have a robot taxi service in Tel Aviv? For me, what does it mean for me? I'm just going to use Move It for it, use the Move It app, use a different app. I mean, what would it look like? I'm going to get a taxi and the car would drive itself to my place, and I'll close the door and it will drive. What would that mean?
So So let's start from what's already publicly declared and clear. Mobileye, Volkswagen, and Champion Motors have ventured together to set up a fleet of robotaxis to be launched in Tel Aviv by 2022, as you say. The service is going to look very similar to what you described. Could be an application that you open and you summon a robotaxi, comes, picks you up, drops you off. Could be also, as we already mentioned, some varieties of such services, like a pooled ride, a pooled shuttle that comes and picks you up for a more favorable price offering, etc., etc. As for the look and feel and the move it application on the top, etc., this is very likely, but still need to be converged. What I can tell as an anecdote is that Moveit was engaged very early on in the analysis that helped us determine where, in which area of the city it would make sense to introduce such a service, what kind of scale of a service we're going to be needing. So the strength, the huge strength of the information and the user base that Moveit has already been leveraged dramatically in this project.
And there's, sorry, go ahead.
If I may add, I mean, there's two things it's important to mention in this type of potential service, not necessarily just in Tel Aviv, but in every urban area. I mean, one is that it's completely clear that, you know, these kind of services are not going to fulfill all needs within the metro area. So the prior understanding of which corridors should be served and how is crucial for the success, both operational and economical, for such a service. That's one thing. The other thing is, again, as Erez said, we're not going to get into the details of how we're going to operate it, but in general, people would expect moving forward that the whole experience of the ride would be very smooth. The connection between different modes of transportation, the ability to pay from one single point of payment, and you know, hopefully in the same way we pay for our you know, mobile phone services today, would be the next step for people to streamline the way they're using different modes of transportation.
Absolutely. And speaking of this and how it might look like for the end customer, how receptive do you think that people are to such services and to such vehicles, and really, you know, allowing a machine take them around? Because, you know, it takes time for us to accept technology, and this technology requires a lot of trust. How do you build that trust amongst consumers?
Very good question. So there are several tracks that helps us build such trust for autonomous technologies. First one is the organic track of driver assistance systems. This is where we already give a lot of computer-based aid to the driver, active aid, like steering the vehicle, braking the vehicle on emergencies, slowing down the vehicle when there's a vehicle ahead of it. So with time, and certainly throughout the last 3 to 4 years, much more forcefully, the public was exposed to the advantages of a computer-aided driving. Making it to the next step of computer-controlled driving and relinquishing the control to the vehicle has other efforts that are being done. The notable one would be our discussion with regulatory bodies with regards to the safety concepts and safety assurances these vehicles can demonstrate to deliver. In a quick figures, more than 90% of accidents happen because of lapse of judgment. Lapse of judgment is something that a computer does not have. Inattention, I didn't see that. That's not something you're going to be hearing from a computer. Yes, it is in many ways a radical thought to say that the computer will drive you, but not more radical than to think that 100 years ago there was a guy driving your elevator. It's things seem dangerous until they're not. So the public acceptance is going to be really demonstrates to really move in the right direction.
I love the elevator comparison. Nir?
I think, from my humble position, Erez is representing Mobileye, and I think his experience is much bigger than me on that, than mine on that. But from a user perspective, we see that such services that started to be operated around the world tracks a lot of early adopters. So definitely in the first few years, we would not be short of, people that would love to experience that. And the adoption curve is always starts with the early adopters. Thanks to the user base that we have, 800 million people, I'm sure that we have more than what we need to operate such a service for the early adopters, and the others will follow.
All right, thank you. So I want to go into the testing phase a little bit, because you guys are already testing, and we would love to hear a little bit about what you're already doing in Jerusalem. But first of all, I'd like to take a few seconds, because you guys did help us with a short video, and I would love to share that with the audience. So again, I'm going to ask the production crew to please share that video with us so everybody can watch it. 30 seconds, go.
Here, we are negotiating a complicated left turn. A vehicle tries to yield for us, but he stops in our drivable path, so we inch forward a little bit. Once there's a small window to take, the AV completes the turn.
All right, so Erez, would you like to help us understand what we just saw?
Yes, so you've seen Mobileye's one of the vehicles, the fleet vehicles roaming the streets of Jerusalem. We've mapped a huge chunk of Jerusalem streets, even the narrowest ones. You've seen a vehicle equipped with cameras only, and that has a reason for it. We have a separate technological stack that uses other sensors, so we can build the confidence and safety with multiplication, not with addition. Just to say it, not to get too technical on that, but I think most importantly, what this vehicle demonstrates, and that's a key element here, is the decision-making safety seal that it's equipped with. What we've come to understand, and thankfully we have the Israeli driving culture to help us to forge our technology in that area, we've came to understand what it is that the social contract of negotiation, of careful and cautious negotiation. And our team, led by Professor Shai Shalev-Schwartz, has actually digitized that social contract of how you negotiate carefully in a way that can help us assure that the vehicle will maximize the agility without ever causing an accident by itself. It really follows the contract to the letter, and knowing the contract and knowing those boundaries, it allows it to stretch the agility all the way to the edge to deal with the hectic driving culture in Jerusalem.
And you said that, you mentioned that, it wasn't me, that the hectic, I mean, and if you mentioned that there's a hectic driving culture in Jerusalem, and I guess that this means that if an autonomous vehicle can drive in Israel, or specifically in Jerusalem, it can drive anywhere.
Almost anywhere. I saw some worse places in India and Nepal, but I think that we're pretty much covered otherwise.
Actually, yeah, maybe that will be the next location to do that. Nir, did you guys also use Israel as a good test bed for your initial or original product?
Yeah, and I think it's pretty amazing story, because we did that, and I think Waze did the same, and you see all three companies here are using Israel as a test bed, and usually in different areas of software, it just doesn't work. And in case of mobility, it's probably a good one. In our case, we're definitely not being known as the best public transit infrastructure company in the world, and we figured out that the level of chaos will represent a strong need, and if it wouldn't work here, we probably won't be able to be successful. And that was our main or first milestone we put for ourselves. When Waze started, they got 50,000 users in 6 months. Our goal was 50,000. We reached 100,000. It just means that people that does not drive need the information even more desperately than the drivers. So moving forward, looking at the world starting to use multimodality services, then the need of information and kind of like controlling all the moving parts will become crucial.
Absolutely. And part of that and bringing that to the world is also dealing with the regulators and how they accept this, not just the end users. And you mentioned this before, the regulation is a very important part of any mobility revolution. And in this regard, the Israeli regulator is very different from the US regulator, for example. And when we've talked about this before, you guys mentioned that this might be the active versus silent regulator type of example. Can you explain a little bit what are the differences that you guys are experiencing with regulators in Israel compared to, for example, the US?
Sure. So making an autonomous vehicle transformation, autonomous driving transformation, autonomous mobility transformation requires regulatory and legislative steps that if you let time and experience, regulator, society, crosstalk determine the pace for it, you will find yourself lingering for quite a long time. Israel has marked for itself the goal of running on an accelerated path to introduce autonomous mobility, and the regulator, a cross-office discussion is been invoked by the regulator to converse with the industry on what are the hurdles of introducing such solutions, the regulatory hurdles, and how can we overcome them. Such discussions, for example, help us clarify to the regulator how to really understand the techie stuff of how we validate and how they can communicate that safety that you were just asking about to the public. How can they get the assurances they need as the representative of the society that this technology has, which undoubtedly a huge benefits, doesn't have a backfire hiding in it. And very, very active, very, very engaged. In other areas of the world, US included, you can see regulators more in a passive mode, sitting on a fence, defining some stuff that the actors should be reporting, but not giving the full, not always giving the full regulatory comfort or umbrella that is required. There are very bold discussions also in the US with the regulator. I just think it would be good to look at the Israel one and see the startup spirit also in those offices.
Okay. Would you say that, for example, what we've seen with ride-hailing services or car-sharing services in the US and in other areas in the world just starting to operate and then the regulator just responds versus a more active regulator that does it before the service is even there?
Yeah, so I think doing it before the service is even there actually paves the path to a more sustainable business operation, a more predictable, sustainable business operation for the industry players.
Nir, are you guys experiencing the same or have experienced the same as well?
No, we're experiencing a little bit of a different approach. I mean, the regulators in Israel, in regards of what we are doing or what we used to do before, is very different from the rest of the world in a way that most of the world control mobility within the municipality area rather than, let's say, a federal or a country level. In Israel, there's a lot of debates if this is the right approach or not. But in our case, for example, if you want to talk about regulating the public transit payment system, which is, as I mentioned before, an important component to streamline the ride, there's an advantage of the fact that in Israel you can take a decision on a federal level and deploy it across the board, while in other countries it's hyper-local and highly regulated, and it's very, very difficult to track the differences between different cities, even within the same country. So in that aspect, I think that there's still an advantages of working with the federal level, government control.
Thanks, guys. Now, I want to use the rest of the time that we have in order to introduce some questions from the audience to give them. So we're going to do this live. So, guys, if you have questions in the audience, feel free to send them, and we'll try to ask all of them here live. And the first question that we have is from Smadari Nat, who's asking if there are any projections of what will be the cost of an AV.
Great question. So we are looking at, when it comes to, depends on the service type, but if you at large compare it to, say, a human ride hailing versus a robot taxi ride hailing service, we're looking at a ballpark of 30 to 40% discounts. These discounts could get even more significant when we look at the shuttled services that are pulling people together. Important to understand there may be that the part of the economical benefit comes from removal of the driver, but a second commonly overlooked term has to do with the coordination of the vehicles traversing the streets, which you don't have in a taxi station or a ride-hailing service.
So I'm not sure if I heard any specific numbers, but I guess that the answer here overall is to be continued, to be predicted, or to be mentioned
but
later on.
We're seeing in several analysis something that can drop us by, as I said, around 30% compared to existing services.
Okay. So one last question that we have from Liron Shilo in the crowd is, if scientists can emulate a social contract through code in cars, would the same learning or coding capabilities be implemented in other sectors?
I wish. I wish we had a social contract digitized in so many other places, but driving, it's where it becomes safety critical, and I think that's where science jumps in for the safety criticality. In other areas, we can remove unpleasantries by social contracts digitized, but we'll take it on another opportunity probably.
Things like that in the US, I hope that we could find ways to have a better relationship between people, just controlled by policies that we have some control over.
I can absolutely agree on that. And this is actually really good timing to mention that. Guys, I am very, very thankful. This was so much fun, and I hope that this was interesting for you guys as much as it was for me, and for our audience as much as it was for me. Hoping that next time we meet will be both face-to-face and on a virtual environment to mix the two and during better times. I'd like to thank you guys very much for joining us today. I am Noah Oron, Business Development Director at Kaltura. Erez Dagan and Nir Erez, thank you very, very much. Guys, please stick around for the next panel that we have coming up, and stay with us here at The New Tomorrow. Thank you very much, guys. Ciao.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Ciao, ciao.
Adam, it's great to see you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, can you hear me?
I can hear you perfectly. It's great to have you today.
Thank
I
you.
must admit that I'm a lucky investor in Taboola, and I'm humbled to be a board member in this great company. When we first met, I did not really understand what Taboola is doing, but now I know that with over $1 billion in revenues and some 1,500 employees, Taboola must be doing something great. Many of the people in the audience do not really know you and Taboola. If you can share with us a little bit about what Taboola does and why it's going to be such a great company.
Sure. And thanks for having me. First of all, just a personal thank you, because Chemi, thanks to you and everyone having me. I was able to approve 1 hour away from my wife and the kids. My wife agreed to take the kids away and play with them. So 1 hour away from the kids is a big deal. So thank you for that. 2 babies at once while working is crazy. So, in terms of the mission of the company, we our mission is to save journalism, be the driving engine behind journalism. And we do that by helping consumers discover things that are interesting and new to them. And you've all seen our product, Bloomberg.com, CNBC, The Independent. Usually when you read an article at the bottom, it will say, you may also like, giving you more things to read from the site you're on or from the web. We feel like it's a very special type of business and culture, mainly in the sense that it's a very win-win type of culture that we've built Taboola upon. We only grow our business if publishers or partners are growing, as opposed to the Google and the Facebooks of the world. We don't have a side business. The only thing we have is our relationship with our trusted premium local and national publishers. So it's a very special type of dynamics. It's my first job. So it's this July will be 13 years. So my bar mitzvah is coming up, and before this, I was in the army for 7 years in the coolest unit in Israel, of course, as an engineer and an officer. And like you said, I'm very lucky to have met you. As many of you may not know, I met Chemi for the first time in 2009. I came to present and pitch, and I told him the future will be different. People will go to Google when they know exactly what they want to search. But what happens when they have no idea what they're supposed to be discovering? Search in reverse. Recommendations will be all around us. And he said, it's very nice to meet you. Please leave. But let's stay in touch. And then in 2015, he agreed to invest. I'll never forget that breakfast. He told me, you only agreed to join our journey if it's going to be a big one. And as long as it may take to build something great out of Israel. So it's been amazing to be together for all this time and going through ups and downs, many of both, so it's good to be here.
Thank you, Adam. It feels like it's just at the beginning still. Through the years, I've been following you through social networks, Instagram, seeing what you're posting, exercising every day and taking care of your kids, traveling around the world, living 24/7, running from customer to customer, talking to your employees, inspire them and lead them. And all of a sudden, one day, a virus comes into our lives and creates a health crisis and a global financial crisis. Do you remember when you really understood that we have a problem, and how this crisis affected Taboola? What were the things that worried you? And if you can talk a little bit about, what were the things you did initially, and how did you deal with this crisis?
Yeah, I mean, it's very hard to explain how overnight everything changed in the business. We started hearing about it. We have offices all around the world, so we collected feedback and information for people on the ground that were living in different places around the world. So, I mean, one thing that's worth saying is that Taboola as a company, and as you know, we're one of the things that the values that's really important to us is being aggressively transparent before COVID-19 in general. So, we usually have all hands every quarter, every day. more than 1,400 employees get a daily financial email about everything that's going on in the company. I would argue that anyone at Taboola, office managers somewhere around the world working for Taboola, know probably more than senior management in some other companies, and I'm very proud of that. And it's thanks to this trade of having people know so much about the company and feel like they're not really employees because they know so much, and we're trading that risk of telling so much and being so transparent. Building on that, as COVID-19 happened, it allowed us to continue to speak to each other freely and actually a lot more. So some things that we've done, we immediately moved to a weekly all hands. So if beforehand I had once a quarter all hand with all employees, every Thursday now I go on a call with our president and COO, Eldad, and our head of people operations, Christy. And we're talking about, I present a few slides, and I told Taboola, this is not going to be one of those great presentations every week. It's just going to be a few slides about the business. And then we're going to move into Ask Me Anything sessions. Now, when I say Ask Me Anything, Chemi, it's an anonymized Google Doc that HR type the questions they get from 1,400 plus employees. And I go over 100% of them. I don't skip any question. And we get every possible question. Adam,
what was the one that really was?
Are we going to go public? Are you concerned about the merger? How do you have time to play Lego? How do you deal with 2 kids and working so hard? I mean, personal things and work things. And until when are we going to be working from home? And what would every possible question you can imagine. And that's about 40 minutes of questions that we answer. And sometimes we say, this is a great question, we don't know. Or we say what we think. And people really love, it feels like we're all in one room. Funny enough, we move from a sharing economy to a screen economy. We're all on screen all the time. I'm productive, but I'm exhausted. But we're also very close to each other. And I think that's another thing that we're seeing in COVID-19 in terms of what happened to our company is that intimacy went up. We're being invited to our clients' home all the time. What used to take us weeks or months to schedule now takes days. We're seeing each other in jammies. We're seeing each other not prepared, haircuts, issues. And so in many ways, it kind of created something that I hope will actually not go away when COVID-19 ends. This level of intimacy and opportunity to be direct with each other, do everything in 30 minutes is a great thing for many companies to learn. And I think, operationally, companies tend to look mainly inside in times of crisis, how to make sure nothing breaks. And we do that. We're very lucky to have not fired employees. I have 600 people in Israel. After the merger, we'll have about 1,000 or so. We have people around the world. I feel very lucky to be in a position that I cannot let go people, but I've cut everything else that I need to cut. So I put employees first, and I feel very lucky that I can, in times of crisis, because this is a special type of crisis, we can keep jobs. But saying that, we also started an offense track, which is counterintuitive to think about opportunities and growth when you're under attack by this crisis. And we said we're going to start a team that just focuses on growth, and that team comes to present to management. That team, we're speaking about ideas and things like that. So we made sure we separate a piece of our body that's just focusing on what can we do now that we could have never done in other period. How can we lean into our clients, be closer to them? What type of clients will never work with us, but now they do? Growth. So from an operational perspective, we did a downside, what we needed to do to be responsible, but we separated a piece of us to say, you only focus on growth. Don't talk to us about anything about growth, revenue, X-Tech, margin, anything that might be interesting for our business that hopefully might even stay after. And personally, I on a personal level, COVID-19 was, like I said, I'm productive and exhausted, but I'm also very lucky. I don't think I've ever seen my daughter, who's 9 months old now, as much as I see her now. I'm having breakfast with my son. My wife still likes me. I mean, all these things cannot be taken for granted. I used to travel 30-40% of the time, so I'm really appreciating the moment because this will end. And when this ends, I want to look back and ask myself if I did everything I needed to be doing and could be doing during this time.
Great. Just for a full disclosure, so that you know, the employee that asked if we are going public was actually paid by the board.
Of course, it's part of the question.
But we never heard the answer, so.
No, I tell people that if it wasn't for COVID-19, I would really plan on it sooner rather than later. I'm excited about taking Taboola public. I mean, as a merch company, we're looking at approximately $2 billion in revenue out of the Holy Land, global, mobile, growing fast, profitable. So, I mean, we have a lot of what I think the world expects, investors need, now more than ever, old school, good business, growing, profitable, tech-driven, all those good things. So I'm excited about the opportunity. Also, I think Israel has shown that there are so many amazing companies out of Israel that have these big dreams to be here forever, right? Fiverr, Wix, Iron Source, some of them are public, some of them might become public. So I feel like there's a whole new generation of how entrepreneurs out of Israel, in Israel or living outside of Israel, like myself in New York, think about running their company. So I'm excited about it. I don't know, Chemi, to your question, I don't know if this will happen soon or a bit later, because I feel like we're fighting a whole new type of fight. But I do hope that we'll continue to run a great business that will give us options.
Great. Adam, can you, so first of all, when on the board, I remember that you asked the board members to share with you what other companies are experiencing through this crisis. But I must tell you that I've learned so much from what Taboola is doing, and I try to implement it in other companies. And one thing I observed is that Taboola is driven by data. You researched the history of crisis, you try to understand the implication of the financial crisis and how does that impact on your performance. And then you launched a major effort to keep on running the company, trying to optimize it very delicately. But things have changed and we will never go back to where we were. We are landing somewhere in a new normal, as they say. Every day is a new normal. But I wanted to ask you how the crisis affected you, your mindset, your caption of the world, your vision about the company, how that has created an impact on Taboola, and how Taboola created, what kind of impact are you going to make on the world? What have you done, or what are you going to do that is different than things you did before?
I mean, overall, we wake up in the morning every day thinking that what we do and our purpose really matters. Because in a world that is so in a need for premium source of trusted information, guidance, local guidance in your neighborhood, national guidance about your country and about the world, it is so important for me, for our kids and their kids, that there is a very strong, surviving and thriving readership and journalism in the world. When I look around, the companies that have currently become very strong are primarily platforms, and though there are consumer companies, and they're doing a good job. Google, Facebook, Snap, Amazon, but their motivation is to first of all take care of themselves, and then, if they have the time, to take care of everybody else. And everybody else is the only thing we focus on. And so, before COVID-19, in COVID-19, and after, this is the only reason we do what we do, and why almost 300 people apply for a job to work at Taboola. We're growing fast. We started a university to just focus so much on values and culture, because it's the only thing you can't copy. I can copy your product, I can copy your pitch, I can't copy your culture, how you do what you do. And culture is, that's yours forever. So, before COVID, in COVID, and after, this is the only reason we exist. And I don't expect us to morph outside of that ever. I think we'll forever be devoted to help consumers discover things they may like, and make journalism strong and thriving. I think what this caused, and what we're seeing is we had to react in some creative ways that we didn't necessarily had to do before. As an example, what's our responsibility to what we recommend? We've seen so many healthcare claims coming up. People started claiming things about masks, about healthcare, about different solutions. Very dangerous. When you recommend to 1.5 billion people, and people click on Taboola over 20 billion times a year, you have a responsibility to make sure certain things don't happen. So we have a dedicated team, over 50 people now, that we pay salaries, full-time job. And in COVID-19, this became a huge focal point for us, that all they do is review 100% of content that people pay us to promote. So that is a new thing that happened in COVID-19. And I can tell you, this is a very sensitive area, what to recommend, what not to recommend. What is other company doing? What do they not? So we're doing that. And I'm proud to say that there's a lot that we choose not to do, leaving money on the table. But I think this reinforces our purpose and who we are for a long time. We decided that in many countries, especially early on when COVID-19 happened, there was a need to know more about COVID-19. But some countries had a need for positivity. They needed to celebrate happiness. So we decided to allocate a portion of the recommendations we have in per geo basis as part of Taboola News, which is our partnership with device manufacturers, OEM, and say the first card will go to either trusted source of information about COVID-19, so you know the latest, but also positive news. Videos of people singing from the porch, doctors speaking about what they're hopeful, because we wanted to spark positivity around the world, and we said we have a chance to do it, we should do it, and of course for no cost. We launched a website that was just exposing all of our data. We said we know so much about what people when people care about Corona, what else would they care about? By the way, they care about amazing things. They care about cooking. They care about education. They care about how to fix their home. All of these pockets of curiosity are great for publishers, for advertisers, for investors. We said let's give it for free so the world knows what's the curiosity pulse of the internet, and maybe that will spark innovation for free. So all of those things were important. And then we created, like you said, and kudos to Eldad and Tom, our VP strategy, and the team for immediately creating a model with very different scenarios for how the world could look like. What happens if this happens, or this happens, or this happens, and how should we execute across each scenario? And all of that is important because execution is everything, especially in times like this. And then so post-COVID, honestly, right now, I always say that my strategy is 24-hour-old now because I can only focus on today. It's like so much going on. I've never been so busy, but the truth is that I'm very excited about the merger with Outbrain. It's my, it's a huge event. It's the biggest event of my career and life. My family has expanded twice last year. Outbrain merge announcement, and Ellie was born, Eleanor. So this is honestly post-COVID-19.
Not in order of importance, though.
No. And don't tell anyone that I said that in that order. Of course, it's between you and me, Chemi. So, I think post-COVID-19, I hope that we're merged. I hope that we're one. I hope that we're, we have an amazing story out of the Holy Land. We can all be very proud for many years after. We have a lot of energy, So that, to me, that's, if we can get to the merge, focus on that, and bring all the good things that we've learned from COVID-19 into our new day-to-day operation. I'm telling you that we're way closer now to some clients than we've ever been, and we could have met them in person, and now we can't.
Adam, I was told that we got only 20 minutes for this session, unfortunately too short. And as you know, my father, before passing away, wrote the book, No Room for Small Dreams. So we have about a minute to talk about your own dream. And if you want to share with us what you shared with your employees today about Black Lives Matters, choose your battle here. But you have about a minute before they throw us to backstage.
Okay, so I'll just say that, funny enough, my best quote is from your father, No Room for Small Dreams, which I've used many times internally and externally. So I'll just tell you, my dad is a guitar player. And growing up, he always told me that people that get to create in life are truly happy. And I should always focus on being creative. And I hope that's my dream, to constantly create, technology, music, kids, don't tell my wife. But that's my dream, and I hope to impact things like discovery, Taboola, healthcare, education. These are my areas of passion. Today I posted, I sent the company an email about what's going on here, which is very sensitive. I mainly wanted to address the fact these are very, very hard times. This is not about equality or diversity. This is about supporting the Black community, so very specifically. So I spoke about that. I posted about it. And I want to also recognize that I come from a very privileged configuration, and there's a lot that I don't know, and I want to know more. So that's what we've been speaking about, and it's very challenging being here.
So I was told that we have another 1.5 minutes.
Yes.
So what's the message that you want to send? Many people are watching now, entrepreneurs, investors, people from Israel, people from the United States. You're in New York, I'm in Israel. What's a final message that you want to deliver and to the audience before we're closing down?
Well, I tell everyone what I would tell myself if I've given myself an advice 15 years ago, or my kids when they ask me, if they ever ask me for an advice. And it's a very simple one, which is get involved and do. I don't really care if it's the right decision or not. I think putting yourself in a situation, join a company of good people at any position, and iterate over time into everything you can become. I don't think it matters if to go to the best school. I don't think it matters to join the best company. You can always go to Google if you fail in your dream. Sorry. But my point is that get involved.
It's not putting it everywhere.
Yeah, there's failing is okay. I'd rather fail trying than never try at all. So that would be my best advice. Just get involved. It doesn't even matter what it is that you do. Just get to be part of something.
That's great, Adam. It was a pleasure to speak with you and share some thoughts and learn more about Taboola. I'm looking forward to the next 10 years. I'm sure you're going to fulfill every possible dream for yourself, for your team, for your investors, and no pushing, but we have some expectations. And I want to wish you best of luck and stay safe in this new reality. And I want to thank IAC and the Peres Center for Peace and Innovation for putting this great conference together. We're living at very challenging times, but I trust the spirit, the human spirit, and our ability to innovate our way out. So stay tuned. Taboola is a company to watch. Soon, hopefully, at some point in time, the merger will be completed, and you'll be one company that focuses on growth. And I'm looking forward to the ride. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, IC.
Thank you.